Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Mentality Project, Mentality Mondays Healthy Masculinity Conversation Series. I'm Chelsea Hill, use she and they pronouns, one of the health promotion specialists here at The Well. And today we are very excited to have Zach Westerbeck as our special guest, who's going to be talking about the work that he does and its relationship to healthy masculinity. We're also joined by my co-host, Anthony Siliberto, who I'll pass it off to, who will get us started with today's conversation.
Hi, everyone. As Chelsea said, my name is Anthony Siliberto, and I am one of the co-leads on the Mentality Project. I'm also one of the assistant directors in our Office of Fraternity and Sorority Programs, and I use he and he series pronouns. To get us started, Zach, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, both of you, for having me on the show today. It's an honor to be here. For everybody who's tuning in, I am a mental health advocate. I'm a professional speaker. I'm a college success coach, and I'm the author of the book "You're Not Alone," which is a mental health guide for 18 to 24-year-olds. And I got into this line of work because of my own journey with what I like to call my brain health, not using the conventional term mental health. And I use that as a destigmatizing tool. But with my own journey with my brain health, starting in late 2015, early 2016, that kind of catapulted me into my journey of learning how to overcome symptoms of severe anxiety, deep depression, and inevitably thoughts of suicide, and then finding the right help and receiving a diagnosis of a chronic brain disorder known as obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD, that impacts about 1% of the world's population. And so it's a large quantity of people when you think about the world, but it's a small percentage of us that live with these symptoms on a daily basis. And so just learning how to navigate that, and then wanting to, through my journey of struggle, make sure that others did not suffer in silence or feel like they should be ashamed or feel guilty for experiencing anxiety or depression or even thoughts of suicide. Because after going through that journey, I know that it's not a choice. Like, I don't choose to wake up and feel anxious. I wish I could turn it off every second of the day, but it's part of my genetic makeup and just a part of my reality.
Thank you so much. Beautiful work that you do. And you did describe, why you do the work that you do. And I'm just wondering if you can give us a little bit more, just diving deeper into who you are, Zach. How did you get started in this field, and what was your journey to becoming a mental health advocate? I'd love to just hear more about that and your experiences.
Yeah, that's a great question, Chelsea. So for me, like, it initially started with the onset of these symptoms, and I was 22 years old. I was a recent graduate from Purdue University. I was in the Greek system while I was at Purdue, and in 2010 to 2014, we weren't really talking much about mental health. So I didn't have any education on the topic whatsoever. And so when I started to experience these symptoms in late 2015, I responded like, when you actually begin to understand kind of the stigma around mental health, I responded in the way that most people do. And I kind of shut things down, decided that I was going to figure this out on my own, that in all of my infinite wisdom, my brain was like a light switch. I just flipped on a part of my brain that I could easily flip back. And so that's what I committed myself to for the first month of 2016. So for 31 days in January, I was going to flip my brain back. That was my plan. And I tried doing that for 31 days, trying all these different remedies to flip it back, and nothing was improving the symptoms. And by the end of the month, not only was I struggling with severe anxiety, but now a second symptom had crept in, and that was deep depression. And I'd never felt these symptoms in my entire life. I had known of people that had experienced it, but again, I had old stigmas. I thought it was something that you could just push through with the right amount of determination. And I was sorely wrong. It was actually the complete wrong mentality to have. And as I denied myself the help that I needed, I continued to spiral, and my brain health deteriorated more and more over the course of a couple months. And at my peak period of kind of my dark period as I relate to it, I was having thoughts of suicide from the moment I woke up until the moment I went to bed. And it wasn't until I hit my rock bottom moment where I confided in my parents and told them what was going on, that they planted a little seed in my head that it was okay to go ask somebody for help. They didn't know who, but they just knew that I needed to go talk to somebody. And so that's what started me on my journey to recovery. But what planted the seed in my head to start advocating was after I'd received my diagnosis of OCD. It wasn't like, boom, I was cured, right? With brain disorders and anybody who's struggling with anxiety or depression, a huge part of it is a slow road to recovery and getting your symptoms to a manageable place. And I had ended up in an OCD chat room. So it was thousands of people around the world commenting in this group chat about their symptoms. And still to this day, I can picture it and remember it. But it was really heartbreaking because it was just one message after the other of people that were suffering and struggling, and they wanted help. They wanted to feel better. They felt alone. They felt alienated, isolated, misunderstood. And that was really the first moment where I realized, okay, number one, I'm not the only one dealing with this. Like, there's other people that actually have OCD. So this isn't just like I'm being punished by the brain gods and now I have to deal with this all on my own. But there's other people going through it, and that they're suffering and they're ashamed of it. And they're kind of in these chat rooms in the corners of our society. Like, why isn't this being talked about? And so in 2018, I had a mentor at the time come into my life, and he told me that universities were interested in people talking about their mental health or their brain health. And so I remember I gave my first speech down the road from here at University of Laverne, and that was pretty much it. I mean, I became mental health first aid certified. I developed I've been developing a really, really thorough program for years. And then I wrote the book, You're Not Alone, which is all the information that I wish I would have had. But it really started from a desire after being in that chat room to just help people. I just remember calling a friend and saying, if and when I get well, I want to speak out about this. Like, I never want somebody to suffer alone, because this sucks. Like, it is physically painful dealing with these symptoms. And it's BS that I have to feel embarrassed by it and feel like I have to shelter other people from my struggle. So that's a little bit more about me and how I got started in the field.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. You've really given me a lot to think about in terms of diving deeper. I'm really interested, you talked about the mentality you had to flip the switch in your mind, right? And our program is called the Mentality Project, and it's about, changing mindsets and opening to explore what healthy masculinity looks like. So I'm curious, from your experience, what do you think the relationship between healthy masculinity and mental health is?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it depends on which lens you're approaching it with. And I think that if you're approaching it with, and I never want to judge people or make them feel guilty for their viewpoints, but in my opinion, if you're approaching it with more of an archaic mentality, you look at mental health as something that you have to shoulder through on your own, and something that you don't speak about, that it's your problem, it's your burden to bear. And just, it's that mentality of being self-sufficient, of having to figure out things on your own, of a really narrow lens of what it means to be tough. Now, if you're looking at it through, and that mentality can lead to intensified feelings of anxiety, depression, and then thoughts of suicide. So it's actually, it's a really detrimental mentality to have, especially over the long run. Now, if you're looking at it through a more evolved lens, and I say that comfortably because I do think that I am somebody that evolved through the process. So I was on one side of that spectrum and then evolved to the other side. I think that you look at your, first off, changing it from mental health to brain health. I think you start to look at your brain health as an intricate and really important part of your daily life. And monitoring your emotional well-being is so important to success in all facets of life. And I think that many males want to go out into the world and be successful and carve out a lane for themselves. And when you neglect your brain health, it makes it really, really difficult to do those things. And so it's understanding that actually taking care of your emotional well-being, talking about your feelings, talking about the emotions, the challenges, the traumas that you've been through in your life, it's actually a really, really great tool. And it's a great way to actually become a better, stronger version of yourself. So you actually evolve in all the ways that like a traditional masculine male would, but we just don't think about it that way.
Yeah, I really appreciate you speaking on the evolved mentality from mental health to brain health and monitoring your emotional well-being, which is so true. Not toxic, I don't want to use that word, but unhealthy masculinity does not breed um, for opportunities to be able to take care of yourself in that way. And so
Right.
I appreciate you talking about that connection. And so just diving a little bit more into masculinity, I'm just wondering, how it shows up in your work as you are being a mental health advocate and holding a masculine identified, role yourself, how you can see the impact of mental health, the relationship between masculinity and mental health, essentially, if you could speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest things that I'm always trying to impart on like the young men that I work with in my programs is starting to reframe like why it's beneficial to ask for help, why it's important to be more vulnerable and open, and how asking for help is actually it's a good tool, and it's actually a way to accomplish more, and it's a strength. Being open and vulnerable is a strength, and then leading with compassion. I think that in traditional male circles we lead with acting tough, that oftentimes we express only the emotions that we think are acceptable, which is typically anger and rage in some cases, and violence. And I think I definitely held a lot of those old beliefs. And what was funny is that I am not a violent person. Like I naturally, I don't gravitate towards it. And I do think that there are some men that they do. And there's healthy ways to release that energy through like organized programs, jujitsu, boxing, things like that. But it's getting men to lead with compassion and start to think more about each other, what people are going through, and not just expecting everybody to kind of figure things out on their own. I think that those are really, really key aspects in my programming. And the relationship between masculinity and mental health is cultivating men to start thinking that way, that asking for help is actually a strength. So playing into that traditional masculine card, it is strong to ask for help. It is tough to open up and be vulnerable, and it actually builds deeper bonds. So that's kind of my perspective on that.
Awesome. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you in the terms of a lot of the research, Chelsea and I have talked about, and what we've talked about with our student employee is like at certain ages in child development, like male identified individuals have this like switch, and like there's certain emotions you can show and that are acceptable. And like,
right.
As you continue to become an adult and, change and evolve based on settings and things like that, the box gets a little tighter. So
It does.
yeah, I'm super curious to learn from you and what your perspective is about college age students and their journey with mental health. At Tulane, like I talk about it all the time, our students are double and tripling major as a norm. And to me,
Yeah.
I don't know how that's possible as an undergrad. Like I never
Right.
do that. But they put a lot of extra pressure on themselves. So I think sometimes there's a lack of conversation around mental health until it gets to a breaking point.
Yeah.
You just came out with your book, which is designed for 18 to, I believe, 24 to 25-year-olds. Can you kind of talk about like what tips and tricks are in that book for students to learn?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say that's a really good point that you bring up. And I actually think that this is a reflection of now millennials first and then Gen Zers growing up in an environment where their parents hauled them around from one sporting event to another club to the next thing and it wasn't like that with our parents. You know, it was like, if you could get your butt to practice, good. You had to find the right. And so we're very accustomed to doing, and this is happening at a societal level. It is the fact that, you know, we are becoming a globalized economy. So competition is coming from around the globe to this country. And I think that's a good thing because we're bringing in bright minds from around the world. But I also think that it does create pressure on the home front for students to feel like they really need to be going above and beyond to succeed, to get great jobs. And that's a whole other path. But I would say that is impacting this age group's brain health, because they feel more than ever just this, it's just a pressure cooker to have a better resume than their peers. And like, in a lot of the research that I've been doing and reading on this age group over the last few years, that's one of the biggest things that pops up over and over again. They feel more and more in competition with their peers than ever before. Like, even when I went to school, I didn't feel in competition with my peers. And exactly. And in reading in the research now, these Gen Zers are like, they're happy for their friend that gets the internship, but they're also jealous. So it's just this really, really interesting position that they're in. And it's like, I run a college success coaching program, and I work with young adults on just the life skills that you need to have to be successful. And I work with some individuals that just, they feel that they need to be perfect, and it's exhausting. And it actually has a negative impact on them because they're not perfect. Nobody's perfect. And when they're not perfect, the self-critic comes out. So I know, I'm sorry I went down a path, but you hit a button for me there.
You're good.
I wanted to just mention that so that this age group could become cognizant of the fact that they are in a pressure-filled environment, and to become aware of what are some ways that I can start to change my relationship with what it means to be successful. And I do touch on that in the book. There's a chapter completely dedicated in the book that basically poses the question of, is meaningful work really the most important thing? In this country, having the best career is what we all strive to have. But I lived in Spain for 6 months. My fiance lived in Italy for a while, and that's not the messaging that they're inundated with on a regular basis. It's, we work so that we can go live a quality life, so that we can go stroll parks and hang out with our friends and live life. And so it's just thinking about that balance. So that's one aspect in the book, but largely the book is really focused on some core areas. The first of which is helping students overcome symptoms of anxiety and depression. And the first step in that is destigmatizing and normalizing what it means to have brain health. That's like the biggest piece. That's the first hurdle that we have to knock down. So the first part of the book is really focused on getting young adults to start thinking about brain health differently. So changing that perspective from something negative to something that we all have, and a continuum that we all fluctuate back and forth on based on different factors, like our genetics, like daily life stresses, and then significant life events. So that's the first part of the book. The second part of the book is some of the mindset shifts that they need to make in order to achieve long-term recovery. And I referenced the chapter on meaningful work. So thinking about, how do we not tie up all of our self-worth in our grades or in our career or the internship that we have. Another chapter talks about the releasing of emotional buildup in the body through vulnerability, through expression to trusted advisors and peers. So starting to look at vulnerability as a really, really important tool to daily management of our emotions. Because as human beings, we're going to feel a ton of different emotions every single day. And then the last part is all the tools that they can use. So implementing meditation and mindfulness into their daily life. I'm a mental health advocate. I'm also a meditation advocate. If it were up to me, this might sound a little extreme, but every student across the country, in conjunction with gym class, because we value physical health, every student has to take gym, right? In gym, we would just have students meditate for 10 minutes before class started. So showing them that body and brain are equally as important and that you're taking care of both. So I'm a huge advocate of meditation and mindfulness. It's a huge reason why I have recovered to the point where I'm at. I meditated before this. I feel great, very focused, calm. And then talking about exercise and why it's valuable for the brain, social media management. So a lot of different facets and how you can approach taking care of your brain on a daily basis.
Wow, y'all, support this man in his book.
Yes. Yes.
I need this book. It sounds amazing.
Chelsea,
So
I'm gonna
many.
get you a copy. I'm gonna get you a copy.
So many gems, really, that. And if you're listening to this conversation, I really hope that you are taking some things away. Like, brain health is so important. Mental health is so important, and you're not alone. So definitely, please check out that book because it sounds very, very transformational and just very inspiring. So, no problem. I want to touch back. I really enjoy that you also do success coaching. That's awesome, much needed. And just because I'm taking notes on my end to take back, because since we work for Campus Health, I'm wondering if since you also do success coaching, you are a mental health advocate. Do you continue to see gaps in terms of healthy masculinity programming? Especially in reference to mental health and even in success coaching as well, if you still see gaps in reaching our masculine identified folks.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not to be negative, of course, but I think that the biggest gap that I see is that this type of programming is still optional, which is why I really, really appreciate Anthony, because I feel like he approached it as like, this wasn't optional. This is something that's important for like individuals, members of the Greek community on my campus. And I just, as an advocate, you hear no a lot more than you hear yes when you talk about bringing your program to schools. That's just,
Yes.
that's just the nature of the work. And I think that I would love to, and I always say this, I don't care if it's me. I just want somebody going to your school, because there is a student that's at risk, that is deeply depressed, having suicidal thoughts, and I'm just kind of tired of getting called in reactively. So the biggest gap that I see right now is that this work is optional. It still hasn't gotten to the point where it's mandatory, and there's other programming that has become mandatory. Sexual assault prevention is a perfect example. That was one that I was thinking about before this, that every university has some sort of programming that they do every year. And I really want to get to the place where we have something in place every year for the students to attend, because like on an individual basis with the college success coaching, you referenced that, Chelsea, is like the biggest challenge is like, I have to go in and first change my client's perspective on what it means to have brain health and their individual coaching sessions. So I spend 2 to 3 of the sessions just getting to that point so that they'll open up to me and we can start to have the real conversation. And so if we could just make it commonplace to talk about brain health and talk about our emotions, our emotional well-being, like it would, like we would reduce the amount of people having to utilize the CAP Center by 50%, because brain health challenges get worse. They amplify over time when we bottle them up. If people were just opening up, we would scoop probably 50% of the students out that had, mild to moderate symptoms and could improve just through talking about it. So that's, sorry, I'm on my soapbox, but that's kind of my
No, you're not. It's real stuff. And it makes me think about, on my end, on programming you're absolutely right. It should be necessary. Health should come first. We learn about writing, arithmetic, and math, but we should also be learning about emotional regulation, mental health,
life skills.
Right? Absolutely. That should, because when we have these, we're able to show up better in this world for ourselves and for others, and be able to treat each other with respect. And just creating a better place for everyone where we feel safe, to have these safe conversations, to be able to connect on a deeper level. So what you said was absolutely real.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And to piggyback off what you said, is I think that our education system needs a revamp with the life skills. So I'm glad that you brought that up. We've got too many students that are coming from environments where it's great that they're learning about geometry, but how does that apply to them?
Right.
And we need to be
I can't
teaching
remember my
life skills.
formulas.
Exactly. And I can't either. And it can, and like how do we
But I can
teach them life
remember
skills?
someone that hurt me. I can remember, me not
Exactly.
expressing my emotions or
Mhm.
or feeling unsafe or my mental health is just out of whack. I can remember these things. I'm dealing with these things, but I'm not dealing with writing or math and science. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Exactly. And imagine if we had courses that taught students economic empowerment. So now all of a sudden, a student that maybe is coming from it, because cycles of poverty come with a lot of trauma. So it's again tying it back into brain health. What if we were able to teach students across the country from elementary on basic economic empowerment tools, basic things to help them break the cycle of poverty so that they can create a better life. I think one of the biggest things in this country is we still have this old narrative, and this ties into the masculinity, and then I'll jump off my soapbox again. We expect people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. There's a select few people that can do that, but we have to understand that there's thought processes that are formed from the moment that you're born. And if you're born into certain environments where there's a lot of trauma, a lot of abuse, you carry that with you through life. It doesn't just disappear. So you're already behind in the race of life because, and I don't know if you have all seen this video online. It's really cool, but it's like they're like, take 2 steps forward if you don't have any parents if you have 2 parents that are still married. Take another step forward if your parents make X amount of money, a year.
Mhm.
And it just gave a visual of like how all of these different factors put other people ahead, and yet we kind of think that we live in this equal society. And it's like, well, I know we're working towards that, but there's just a lot that could be done at the educational level that
Mhm.
regardless of where you come from, you could get all of these skills that those kids are learning anyways through their parents or whatever, because there's not as much trauma in the household, and you would therefore be more likely to be successful. So I'm sorry I went on a tangent there, but it all ties into the masculinity and brain health idea. And they're doing these things in the UK, for example. Like they just push through legislation that is making mental health education a part of their core curriculum in the public schools.
Mhm.
So it's happening. It needs to happen here.
Yeah, I am a huge advocate for making things more consistent and mandatory. I think in terms of, you referenced sexual violence prevention, Chelsea and I both have experience working in that field. Like, I'm not a huge fan of one-off programming. Like, it's great to have a large-scale program, but like, what is the follow-up to those?
Absolutely.
So that they're getting consistent messaging. And absolutely, I feel like a lot of the things that you've talked about also reference a lot of the things that we cover here at Tulane in terms of like the man box and like child development to adolescent development to adult development and all of those pieces. And I'm like just super excited. I'm just going to share now that Zach is coming to Tulane on March 8th, and we are super excited for him to be able to talk with our students virtually during that time and for y'all to like engage with him. But Zach, I'm really curious to know, like, how can someone be a positive role model to their peers with like these life skills and in terms of, destigmatizing some of the fear behind talking about mental health or brain health?
Absolutely. Well, I think that stories are really, really powerful. So the first part comes from normalizing, and that's just peers sharing stories. I love that I get to share my lived experience because it opens the door for others to share theirs. So that's step number one. And then the other part is becoming brain obsessed, is what I like to call it. But waking up every single day and looking at everything that you do in your life through the lens of, how is this either going to help or hurt my brain? And it fundamentally changes the way that you operate your life, because you start meditating for your brain to achieve calm so that you are a better individual for the people around you. You exercise and incorporate movement into your life because it increases blood flow to the brain, which makes you, creates higher levels of focus, reduces stress. So again, makes you a better human being for yourself and those around you. It boils down to the foods that you eat. the substances that you put in your body. When I was a college student, I was not a healthy individual. I was not the model healthy citizen at school. But since learning about the effects that alcohol and other substances can have on the brain, it's like, I still drink from time to time, but alcohol is not a cornerstone of my existence. And it all ties back to being brain obsessed. I just love taking care of my brain and feeling calm and feeling focused. And I'm able to advocate and show up for others better. So I think it starts by just implementing some simple things, meditating 10 minutes a day, incorporating some exercise, thinking about different ways that you can take care of your brain is really where I always recommend people to start.
Thank you.
We'd like to, just a couple more questions. Wondering if you could share any resources that are available to, especially our students that are listening, but anyone who is listening that might be struggling with mental health or cultivating healthy masculinity in their everyday life. And feel free to plug your book once again.
Yes.
But anything we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, well, and the book actually does have a ton of resources in it, and it goes in depth. So there's like some of the bigger organizations, like there's the suicide hotline in there, or lifeline, I should say. And I've got it right here. So I was just looking through, but like I always recommend students to start with the CAP Center, and here's the reference section. So for everybody looking, it's a couple pages, so there's a lot. But you could always start with your counseling center at the university, and most universities right now are on a virtual model, and every school is a little bit different and has a different amount of sessions that you can actually attend before you actually start to have to pay for them. Most universities do like 10 to 12, I've seen. I don't know what Tulane's is. Maybe you two can speak to that.
I'm not sure, but you just gave me something that I need to learn about. So
Yeah,
I'll be doing that.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So you can start there. And then if you're looking for, maybe you don't feel like there's any therapists that are a good fit at the particular university you're at, that happens sometimes. So I'm not ashamed to say that it does happen. Or there's too long of a wait. That does happen as well. You can go to psychologytoday.com, put in your zip code, and it'll populate a list of healthcare providers in the area. If you are in a rural or an urban environment where maybe there aren't as many resources, you can also use online telehealth providers like Talkspace or BetterHelp. Those are two great ones, and you can go across borders with those right now. And they do have like psychologists and psychiatrists that you can find in state, but it's just a nice option because you can reach people from anywhere and get treatment. And they have college packages for those, by the way, I should say. Yep. Cool. So they're discounted rates.
Perfect. That's great to know.
Yeah. And Zach, how can we follow you and stay up to date with what you're doing and all of the accomplishments you have going on? And just, keep track of what's going on with Zach Westerbeck.
So the first place you can go is zachwesterbeck.com. And in that space, you can learn more about just my story. If that's of interest to you, you can learn about the speaking programs that I have. I've got a few different ones up there. You can learn about my college success coaching program, and then you can also learn about the book there. So that's kind of like the one-stop shop for all people that are curious to learn more about me and kind of what I offer from a services standpoint. My book is on Amazon, so you can just type in "You're Not Alone, Zach," and it should populate. It's got over 90 reviews. It's sitting at 4.7 out of 5. So I'll take that. So you can find the book on Amazon. And then if you're a student watching this, I love to connect with students on Instagram. So you can find me at Zach_Westerbeck on Instagram, and I'll follow back. And if you want to shoot me an email, it's zwesterby@zachwesterbeck.com. So I'm always an open book. I get emails all the time from people sharing their stories, and I will respond. So that's how you can stay in touch.
Well, thank you so much, Zach, just for your willingness, just for being a mental health advocate for folks. And I really want to encourage students, if you are listening, please utilize Zach. He is a walking resource, mental health beacon. And I'm just so grateful for the work that you're doing. And so we're going to close out today's conversation with asking one last question. You graciously agreed to be a guest on the Mentality Mondays conversation today. And so just for feedback for me, Anthony, and the folks that are a part of the Mentality Project, what form of this work would you want to see, continue at Tulane? Do you feel like these conversations are impactful, or do you have any other ways that you feel that we could be doing a better job to reach masculine identified folks, for just our students in general, who might especially be struggling with mental health?
I think that what you two are doing is great. So, I mean, the only feedback would be to keep it up and keep bringing on just people from different walks of life that have different perspectives, because I think it's a really, really beautiful thing to have a country in which we can share a lot of different ideas and just get information out into the airwaves. It's kind of been cool as an OCD advocate as well to hear from people from Brazil, the UK, New Zealand, telling me that we have some of the best mental health care in the world, which we think there's a lot of improvement that needs to be made. So just continuing to get the word out, right? I think this is beautiful. We were able to have this conversation, but just keep bringing on more unique individuals that can speak to these topics.
Thank you. Yeah, we will definitely keep doing this work and partnering with people in the field like you and colleagues across our campus. We're super excited to continue the conversation with some of our colleagues coming up and reference our conversation here. And for all you watching, is another reminder that Zach will be joining us on March 8th at 6 p.m. Virtually. So we will have a sign up registration on WaveSync for that. And during that, we'll also have some book giveaways that we are doing with Zach. So that will be amazing as well. So if you're interested in getting a copy of the book, I know I have a copy and started reading it, and it's really great. I'll have to give you another Amazon review.
Please five
yes,
stars.
Right? Yes. But yes, please stay tuned to more conversations with Zach on March 8th. Well, thank you, Zach. We appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Chelsea.